Hi guys, welcome to Bridging the Realm. Thank you so much for joining me for today's chat. Today we'll be speaking about navigating the new decade, and we'll be diving into the astrology and numerology of 2020 and 2020 and beyond. So I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions. Please feel free to post them in the chat with capital letters if you do have any questions towards the end. But before we get into that, please like and share this video, subscribe and share with anyone that you think might need this information, as I'm pretty sure we're going to be covering some potent knowledge and wisdom coming from my amazing two guests that I have with me today. And for anyone who hasn't seen their work previously, I'm just going to give a quick intro. And we have today joining us Richard Abbott, who is a spiritual teacher and a master numerologist with over 30 years of experience. He has written 10 books on the topics of numerology, tarot, meditation, spiritual practices, and the mystical traditions. His incredibly powerful messages and accurate predictions on the evolution of humanity has provided guidance for thousands of people around the world in helping them to navigate the current times and also activate their best self, which is Richard's main aim with his work, and also to help people to align with their purpose and their path. So if anyone is interested in learning more about his work, then you can visit his website, www.thehermitage.org.uk. So that's also in the comments below in the description. And I'm also really honored to have my second guest with me, Steve Judd, the master astrologist with over 40 years of experience in all things to do with astrology, including evolutionary astrology. And Steve is also has provided thousands and thousands of people with incredible knowledge on the evolution of humanity through the ages, as well as providing over 40,000 readings to date, with providing people with incredible wisdom and helping them, guiding them on their path of awakening and helping them to realign with their best self. And Steve's knowledge and wisdom has helped so many people around the world with really getting to know what's happening with humanity. Where are we going? You know, where is this leading us? And really helping us to understand the astrology and how everything is connecting, and helping us to see the bigger picture of pretty much how this all connects together. So I'm so honored to welcome both Steve and Richard to my channel today, and I'm sure you guys will have a lot of questions. So again, make sure you save them until the end, and we'll get to ask them hopefully if we have enough time. So Richard and Steve, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Still alive.
Still alive.
Yeah, alive and thriving. Well, you know, ish.
Right. Yes, we're all waiting for, of course, to know the elections, but I'm sure everyone wants to know what your predictions are, whether you have any predictions in terms of who's going to win or not. I'm sure you don't want to get into that, but do you have a little bit of a,
Go on, Steve.
Give us some hope. Come on.
I've done 5 videos on American presidential elections over the last 16 years, 18 years on YouTube. I've always said the same thing: America gets the president it deserves. I did my last video on this about 4 or 5 days ago, and I said, look, the astrology says that Biden will win, but you can never rule Trump out. He's got a kind of trickster, jokester energy, and he's a wild card. You can never rule him out. So until January the 20th, I'm not going to believe anything until I see the next president in the American White House for the next 4 years. I think it's probably going to be Biden, but you can't rule anything out with Trump. What do you say, Richard?
I think that Trump will not go quietly. I said that he would be elected in 2016. I said he would be re-elected this year. That does not look so good for him now, but I don't think he will go quietly. And I think you cannot rule him out. I do not think there is any kind of certainty here that that Joe Biden is a shoo-in at all. But really, what I want to say is that it obviously matters. It obviously matters tremendously who is the president of America. But yet, paradoxically, it doesn't. And I'm very firm in that now. It matters obviously on one level, but on another level, it doesn't, because as far as I can see, it'll be, if it is Biden, it will be say hello to the new boss, same as the old boss. A better hairstyle, but same as the old boss. And that might seem an incredible thing to say, but let's see how it pans out.
Wow.
I have to agree, actually, with basically everything you just said. It will be same as the old boss. It might be a little bit less dramatic and overbearing.
Yeah.
But and it may be a little bit more civilized in a kind of superficial veneer way.
Yeah.
But it isn't going to change that much, because it's still just a bunch of old white men running America, regardless of who's in the White House. And yes, there's always the prospect of 4 years' time with Kamala, and that's something that I hope comes to fruition, because America's in desperate need of feminine energy. Right? Desperate.
Yeah.
The trouble is, the reason why I say it will be welcome to the new boss, same as the old boss, is because it's not just about who is sitting in that seat. You look at the situation in America now, and I mean, this might sound a bit strong, but the two sides of the divide, they hate each other. They don't just disagree with each other, they hate each other. Now, maybe not everybody, but you know, a lot of the commentary you see is not about the other side, you're wrong. It's about the other side, you're evil. And that's why I think it doesn't really matter. It does matter, but then it doesn't matter who is in the hot seat, because that isn't going away. That vibe isn't going away anytime soon.
You're absolutely right. I saw today that Steve Bannon, Trump's ex-policy advisor, who's on remand anyway, has just been said today, just a few hours ago, that they should decapitate Anthony Fauci and put his head on a spike. And it's like,
Wow.
what? That is it's just so, that epitomizes everything you just said about the hatred between the two sides. And it's going to take an absolute minimum of 4 years for the wounds to even seal over, let alone be healed. So the damage is done, and America is basically going to fragment, which in many ways epitomizes what's happening for the world over the next few years as well. Just further fragmentation and not a lot of center ground meetings, unfortunately.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. And the problem is that those kind of comments that you were saying about Steve Bannon, they come from both sides. Steve Bannon gives it la large on that side. I can't remember the woman's name, but I saw something equally bad from somebody on the other side. So the idea that it's a one-sided thing is not correct. They hate each other. It's fragmented. The country is absolutely divided. It's the divided states of America. That isn't gonna get any better. That isn't going to improve. But from that, I take something positive.
Yeah, but this isn't just an American problem, is it? There's that level of division in Brazil, Britain, Australia, India, you name it. There's this sort of growing schism between people, and the polarization of belief that's tearing the world apart and pushing us towards a whole new paradigm by necessity, not desire.
Exactly, and that's the point. So this before this becomes a council of despair, which it could be, it isn't a council of despair, because all of this crazy pushes us towards, like you say, the breakthrough point. And I don't think we're at the breakthrough point yet. And there's much that individuals can do to assist the getting to the breakthrough point. And that's why it doesn't matter who wins the election, because it's just another chapter in the story of getting to the breakthrough point.
This is why I really like working with you, Richard. I haven't got any time for most of the other esoteric, fluffy people out there who just deal with the light and don't want to deal with the dark and don't want to deal with the heavy stuff. I like working with you, A, because you're a realist, and B, because numerology and numerology is perhaps almost a twin sibling of astrology. It's the only other form of divinatory art that actually works on a similar principle to astrology, in that it has a structure to it that can be worked with and explained. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but whereas astrology's really good with timings, it seems to be that numerology, in a kind of backup way with astrology, is also very good with methodology. What would you say to that?
Yeah, there aren't many people. In fact, I don't know of really anybody that fuses the two. I do a little bit of astrological linkage, but they are complementary. They say the same thing in a different kind of way and from a different perspective, and maybe using a slightly different language. So, yeah, I think they can be hugely complementary. Yeah, thank you for saying that, Steve.
Well, much of what I know about numerology, I've learned from you.
Well, good. I'm glad I'm reaching some people. So yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. It's a good. They're complementary disciplines.
Yes, I totally agree, and it'd be lovely one day, 15 years time, when we're both a lot older and we've got more spare time on our hands, we'll write the complementary manual of astrology and numerology.
Yeah, well, yes, it might take 15 years to do it, but yes, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a deal. All right.
Yeah. I'll be the first buyer for that book. So yeah, make sure you put me in the mailing list. But yeah, I always find, from what I know, because I love both astrology and numerology, I always find that the two always complement one another in terms of the information that you get, in terms of the information that I get for myself. Yeah, so I think it's interesting how it works. But yeah.
What Richard was saying just now about how what's happened in this last year hasn't been the answer. We haven't seen the breakthrough yet. If anything, we're seeing a breakdown, but then you have to have a breakdown before you get a breakthrough. This is where perhaps astrology does come in, because looking ahead long term, next year for me is, I've been saying for a long time that next year is a year where I've already used the words recession, depression a lot. The big Saturn-Uranus square is the big thing that's coming up next year, and that's about the clash of the old cultures trying to retain the old sort of greed, profit, corporate patterns versus the new cultures that are gradually forcing their way in, as shown by more and more people getting involved in the esoteric and quasi-spiritual areas of life, different value systems. But the long picture of this points to 2025, 2026, which is something I've been fingering for 30 or 40 years, when Saturn and Neptune come together at the very last degree of the zodiac, 29 Pisces, and they're in the very first degree of the zodiac, 0 degrees Aries. And I've been pinning my hopes. I've been aspiring towards this time for a long, long time. I don't know what the numerology of 2025 and 2026 is, but I'm hoping that that is going to be a whole game changer in a way that we've never seen.
Wow.
So one of the things which numerology says about these times that we live in is that we live under the influence of the number 2. This is somewhat of a generalization, but we live under the influence of the number 2. And actually, Joe Biden is very ruled by the number 2. So it would actually, numerologically, make more sense for him to be president. But we live under the influence of the number 2, and the number 2 is related to the element of water. So the whole principle here, and this isn't where we used to be. So this is the new world, and it's not how it used to be in the old world. So one of the things which I think is coming from the breakdown that we're in now, and we're definitely in a breakdown, there can be no doubt about it, is that it isn't gonna work. We can't get to where we need to be if we lean on structures which can't bear our weight, and many of the structures in our society, many if not most or all, simply can't bear the weight that we're trying to put on them. And the more we try to lean upon them, the harder it gets for us. You know, we are literally all at sea, water, the number 2, and we've got to find a way to navigate the ocean.
Yeah, and putting sticking plasters on old structures is never going to work. We need to either let them all collapse and as they become more and more brittle, or else perhaps, as one of my favourite sayings at the moment is, change the nature of the structures from concrete and steel to rubber and elastics, so that we bend the rules instead of breaking them.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Things have got to be, and this will pan out in due course, but not yet. The rigidity that we've all been accustomed to, you know, this is how it's done, this is how it's not done, is going out the window. And actually, you can see this in the election. The American election is a prism for this, because, you know, Trump's view is that it's only a legal vote if it's done on the day, basically, is what he says. And, you know, that's his argument. And the Democrats' argument is that it's a legal vote if it's a vote. If it's a vote at any time, it's a legal vote. Now, the way that Trump is talking, that is actually how it used to be. So that's the old structure. If you turned up to vote 5 minutes after the polling booth closed, well, tough. That was the old structure. And he's trying to kind of firm that up. But we're in the time of water, and it's just like, it's much more fluid than that now.
We had a brief chat before this meeting now, and myself and Richard were talking about the nature of water. And it's easy to think of water in terms of floods and environmental issues. But what also came up in our previous conversation was the idea of water in terms of feeling, emotion, compassion, empathy. And in the ideal world, we will be heading into a much more sensitive world where we do acknowledge the importance of compassion and empathy, whilst at the same time keeping our feet on the ground and living in a semi-material world. I mean, you can't live on just your feelings. You know, you still got to put food in your belly and clothes on your back. So it's finding the balance in the future between the emerging world of compassion, empathy, with the real world of materialism, without getting out of balance as we seem to have done so far.
And we definitely have gone out of balance. So in this attempt to find our place within the world of water, for want of a better phrase, we've definitely gone out of balance, because it's feelings are a very important guide. But I don't know how you run a society. Maybe we'll find out. But I don't know how you run a society based entirely and primarily on feelings. Because there are good feelings of love and compassion and sensitivity and empathy, and there are bad feelings like hate and envy and jealousy. And I don't, if you do feelings, you have both of those. That's the conundrum that we're in. And that's why perhaps I am short-term pessimistic, long-term optimistic.
I concur. I remember a few years ago, I forget the actual configuration. There was some big astrological configuration in Capricorn. It was to do, and the term that was being bandied about was, this is the correction. It was being called the correction. And I remember thinking, no, this is the start of the correction. And if you view this over, as I'm sure many of the people watching will know, we've all of this last year, we've had Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, something which hasn't happened for thousands and thousands of years, and is never going to happen again for many thousands of years. And with Capricorn ruling the nature of government, whether it's self-government or corporate government or national government, the whole nature of the way we are governed and the way we govern ourselves is changing. But this seems to be reaching a peak right now, and there is this idea of disorder happening stronger and stronger now, which is about to shift from an astrological perspective. Like Richard, I do view the next year or two with a little bit of like, oh my God, here we go. But the long term, I'm actually really positive. And I do think we're going to see some quite startling changes before the end of this year.
Wow, even more
So,
than
so
previously.
that's the key. If I can just say that's the key, I think, to how to get through all this, because the election is an example of how we're governed. But the second bit that you said is the thing I'm actually more interested in my work and in my life, how we govern ourselves. And through the pandemic situation, I have met so many new clients and old ones who have really taken on board the need to take better governance of themselves, i.e., health, well-being, physical fitness, mental clarity, meditation, etc. That's where it's at. That's how you get through this crazy, by taking better governance of the self.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. As opposed to still expecting the state or the employer or to provide for you, and just to be, I hate to use the word nanny state because it's so connected with old patterns from the past, but at the end of the day, we are all responsible for ourselves, and we're especially responsible for our perception and the way we choose to see the world.
Wow, yeah, totally. The perception has shifted, I think. And I think like you're both saying, with having all of this time to think, and being in lockdown earlier in the year, so many people have gone in and started to ask themselves the real question, what does really matter to me? What's really important to me? What do I really value in my life? So hence, I guess there's a lot of people really trying to now take control and really, grab the bull by the horns, I guess. At least from what I see.
What's really surprised me about the pandemic actually is you could see from the word go that some people were just going to knuckle down and get through this and really push it and use it as in a kind of form of self-improvement, and that others were going to kick against it. But what's really surprised me is the thankfully small minority, but very vociferous minority, who are angry, bitter, aggressive, and paranoid, and are convinced that it's a conspiracy, and and I can only say just go down your local A&E and observe. This, I find this to be quite disturbing.
Yeah, to completely go off in that dream world is also not very healthy. I agree. I think it's definitely made people question what the truth really is, and question just generally for example, the media. Now a lot of people think that the media is not really the best place to go to get the real truth, because they do change things a little bit. I have to say, but it's good to keep an open mind to both.
But that's part of the taking better governance of yourself idea, because you need a media of some kind. You need people who are going to be in the business of gathering the information, because you haven't got time to do so yourself. But I think we did go wrong with the media, where we as a society held them up to be these arbiters of truth and like pronouncements from the top of the mountain kind of thing. And that is all going to be swept away. It's being swept away now. And that it can only be a good thing. It can only be a good thing if people are more skeptical of what they are told. Not completely dismissing all that they're told, but saying, yeah, okay, BBC, ITV, Sky, CNN, you say this, great, thank you. But what do I think about it? That is essential. And we haven't done that as a society, and we are now doing it as a society. And that is a very positive thing, I think.
Question.
But I suggest that one possible way in which you're absolutely right on this is that just in the last 50 years, the quality of education worldwide has radically been upgraded. And whether it's, regardless of what you think about it, more and more people are now capable of thinking for themselves. Yeah. And looking at the media, yeah, okay, so you read 3 different newspapers instead of 1 and watch 6 different news channels, and you pick not necessarily the best bits that form your own, that back up your own opinion, although some people do, but really you take it all on board, and from that you synthesize your own best potential version of the reality that's out there. And out of this comes a kind of consensus for the future that is not dictated by any one particular media or politic or religious dogma.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is all coming to be. This has not happened. It's all coming to be, but as it's coming to be, the old system is also crumbling down. So, one of the things I've been saying to people all year, when they say to me, well, what's going to happen? How are things going to go? Are things going to be all right or not? I often will say, well, it depends where you look. And I do think this is true. It depends where you look. If you look at the old structures and the old ways of doing things, you're just going to see ruin, because none of them anywhere in the world are going to be able to withstand what is happening and what is coming. So you don't look there. You look in the mirror, and you look at self-governance, and you look at the improvements that are coming from that community, that person, that new idea, and you go forward with the future, and then you can be more optimistic, I think. So it really does depend on where you look as to how optimistic you can be.
Might I suggest there then that when we look for something that we can find to still be valid for ourselves, one of the best ways we've got of working this is to actually look at our long distant past. If we look back over thousands of years of cultural development, what is it in our histories and ancestries that remains constant and has proved to be of real value and worth? And I'm not talking about things like political systems or religious beliefs. I'm talking about things like astrology, numerology, yoga, and our relationship with the divine, however we each individually see it as being. These have been there for as long as history's been recorded.
Absolutely, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, so I think what will happen is that more and more people will do that, what you've just said, and they actually are increasingly doing it, and they will go back to fundamentals. And one of the fundamentals, as you said, is the relationship with the divine. So one of my predictions long term is that actually God, not in a religious sense, but in a divine sense, God is going to make a comeback. I think God is coming back big time into people's awareness. And the other thing which will come back, I think, is community. Tribe, gathering together of people of a like mind.
That's where I agree with you. When you say community, I think, because friends are a bit like family. They expect you to behave the way they want you to, so they feel comfortable in their dealings with you. But tribe is unconditional. They love you just the way you are, and they're not limited by locality, shape, gender, color, religion, belief, anything. They are truly global.
Absolutely, and in which case you can have tribe through your WhatsApp, because you can connect with somebody in Barcelona, you can connect with somebody in Tokyo, you can be talking to somebody in America, and you can actually have more in common with them than you've got with the people that you live next door to.
Absolutely. If you were to see some of my neighbours, yeah.
Well, yeah, indeed. Although I think it also might be, what also might happen alongside of that is that people will form geographical communities. So I wouldn't at all be surprised, in fact, it's already started to happen, that you're going to get an increasing kind of go to the countryside, let's set up, not camp, but let's build a community in the countryside together of people of a similar mind, that everybody else can kind of just get the hell out of it.
Let's grow our own food, make it an eco village. Yeah, there's a lot of these coming up now.
Yeah, and there'll be a lot more, I think.
Yeah, which is good. I think after this, sorry, Steve, go on.
But I don't want to see that happen purely in the old style dreams of it. I mean, the old style was, once we survive the craziness, we'll all be able to live together in a community in the country, and that's a very survivalist attitude. And it's got to be. It can't be just if we treat it like that, then we're we're looking at it that everything we're doing now is wrong, and it's not. We're not going to just abandon the cities and the cultures we've lived in for so long. We have to adapt and upgrade them so that we can have literally the best of both worlds. We can't just abandon one for something new.
No, and I don't think we will. And I'm not about to hike off to a middle of nowhere and start from nothing. But I think a lot of people will. I think, in fact, I know plenty of people that will, because they're so fed up with with everything else that it's almost like they feel they've got no alternative. So I'm not pronouncing a good or bad. I just think that it will happen.
I think especially with the pandemic now this year, and so many people being stuck alone, it made them realize that they do need a community. They do need to be around other people.
Yeah.
Like suicide rates have gone up, and it just tells you so much about how vital it is for us to be around people that we resonate with. And like, you said that not necessarily the people we're around we even resonate with. So we'll be finding that.
So the suicide rates have gone up. Yes, they have, but so have the rates of people being on their own and finding a degree of comfort in themselves on their own. It's a kind of parallel thing here. And if I were to sort of look at this on a total time stream, then I often say to my clients, imagine yourself on the inside of a pencil sharpener, getting more and more compressed as you get towards that point at the end, having to refine and prune and weed and streamline and become more and more effective and efficient and focused so that you can get to that point of exactitude at the end. And then you can expand into a really expanded consciousness, enhanced world, hopefully beautiful world. But you've got to get to that point of not so much purity or refinement. I use the words effectiveness and efficiency in our own lives to represent that, I think.
Yeah, and that's the self-governance aspect to me. That's why I think it does matter whether it's Trump or Biden, but yet at the same time it does not. It does. I get that it does, particularly for some, but it does not, because neither of them are going to solve the ability of this self-governance of doing what you're talking about. They're not going to have anything to do with that.
Yeah, they're just going to go back to the old ways and perpetuate the old myth and try and keep some type of stability without adapting to the emerging futures. And that to me is so retro and so kind of 18th century, not 21st century.
I mean, I guess in a way it would be better for, I don't want to say it in that way, but it would be better for the worst president, for the one, because everything that needs to crumble has to crumble. It's one of those things where it has to just, and the faster it does, the better, because then we can just get on with the new things, right? So do you see it in that way?
I actually think that next year it's not going to be individuals or groups setting the agendas. It's more going to be individuals and groups reacting to what else is going on in the world. They're playing catch up all the time. And over this last few years, we've had a large succession of astrological significators that have pointed all the way towards 2020. 2020 has been in my vision for many, many years. And now here we are approaching the end of it. And next year, with one very large exception, is looking easier. But that large exception, with Saturn in Aquarius squaring Uranus, it can be complete breakdown because Saturn deals with structure, Uranus deals with change. So it's either going to be revolutionizing our limitations and making our structures more flexible, or it's going to be the imposition of order onto the future in a way that's just going to lead to total breakdown. And I know which one I want.
Yeah.
And I know which one I want, but I think that the only action that I can therefore take faced with that, from numerology perspective, I agree. The only action I can take is to get busy with self-governance. That's the only that's the only thing that I can do, which is of any use at all, to get busy with self-governance and to try to be strong physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and improve and do what I need to do. Because from that position, I can maybe help other people. But if I'm not governing myself well, I'm not going to be able to help other people.
Yeah.
Do you know what, Richard? I didn't expect to be going down this road during this conversation, but listening to you, it's made me ask. It's a question I sometimes ask myself when I'm dealing with clients who are nearing the end of life, whether it's through age or illness. I always say to them, "Look, you're entitled to a good life, so you're entitled to a good death." And when I'm reflecting on this in the day, when I'm not working, I find myself saying to myself, "Well, what is my purpose? Why am I here on planet?" Which is something that everyone asks themselves at some stage in their life. With me, it seems to be a pretty recurrent question. And I find myself, as I get older, increasingly saying to myself, well, death is just a transition of consciousness. And it's not the fact of death that concerns me. It's the attitude and the consciousness that I go into the physical death experience with, that influences what I'm doing after this. And in many ways, much of our life is in practice and preparation for what comes next. To me, we're just down here in a three-dimensional body as a kind of mission, and that when we've done, we go elsewhere.
Oh wow,
so this is how I use numerology. This is how I apply it, really. The principle that I operate on is that we are souls. Let's say soul, but it could be essence, spirit. You use whatever word you want, but we are souls in bodies using minds and feelings. So our bodies and our minds and our feelings are not us. They're just tools that we have access to, or so can use or can't use, but they're not who we are. And numerology, from my perspective, enables us to work out what the soul is meant to do.
Yeah. That's where the similarity between your art and my art comes across, because at the end of the day, it's pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I guess, as you were both saying from before, that now and I guess with the Aquarius age, we're moving a lot more closer to spirituality in a way. So is this whole life after death, is becoming a lot more known now. Science is beginning to prove more and more that there is life after death. So do you see this astrology show a lot more of this kind of the spirituality and science coming together? Is there anything of that?
Can I go first on this one, Richard?
Of course.
In about 5 weeks' time, we've got both Jupiter and Saturn leaving Capricorn and moving into Aquarius within 48 hours of each other. This hasn't happened before, not for thousands and thousands of years. For the two biggest planets in the sky, which have been very visible over recent months, to be moving into Aquarius at precisely the same time. And it represents symbolically a major, major shift from structure, government, density, order, boundaries into something that's on the surface a little bit more detached and impersonal and objective, but also more humanitarian, social and community driven. So I do think we're starting to see the final end of old, really rigid structures in people, and like borders, for example, nation states. These are going to become things of the past as more and more people join together in different types of communities, unlimited by the old boundaries. And again, this is something that I think is going to become more and more visible over the coming 5-10 years.
Oh wow! So more communities.
There is an awakening of, it's a cliche because it's used so often, but there is an awakening of consciousness taking place. And I do expect it to continue and accelerate. But because, to me, there's no dark without light and no light without dark, that's why there is also a very significant movement in the world to shut it down.
Yeah.
And that is not to be underestimated. There is a significant movement. Everybody will have a view on what the names of it are or whatever, but there is a significant movement to shut down the awakening of individuals' consciousness. And they will have a good go at it. They will have a really good go at it. But in the end, I don't think that they will succeed.
I don't want to end it in a situation where the light and dark finally compromise into shades of grey, because that doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I agree.
Because that's just a compromise. And yet there's no point in one being victorious over the other either. It is more of a transcendence we're looking for, I think, an acceleration of consciousness, a development of consciousness. And the more people there are on planet, and the more we all learn in our own forms of spirituality, different techniques of consciousness enhancement, I think the more this potential for transcendence, without wishing to get too cosmic about it, has the potential to really be a global aspiration.
Yeah. And
do we need a Jesus figure on this planet right now?
well, yeah, let's see. I guess on the 21st of December, we'll find out. Is there anything is there anything special about this day? Because I've been hearing it all over the spiritual community. A lot of people are talking about December 21st, 2020. They're saying that there's some sort of a portal opening and this huge energy shift. And I'm guessing, I mean, Steve, you just mentioned about the 2 planets that are moving into Aquarius. Richard, what about the numerology?
That's a number, Richard. You're doing this one.
It provides that date provides the energy of a new beginning. If I'm truthful, pure numerology wouldn't identify that as any kind of magical date. That's when you've got to go to astrology to recognize the outer planets and the shift, the sign changes there. But the pure numerology of that date, 21st of the 12th, 2020, is one of a new birth. Let's put it that way, a new birth.
Okay.
And bear in mind that both Jupiter and Saturn move into Aquarius within 2 or 3 days of that.
Wow.
And this is the start, within in 3 or 4 years' time, Pluto will move into Aquarius. In 5 years' time, Uranus will move into Gemini. In 4 years' time, Neptune will move into Aries. All of these large outer planets are going to move from the feminine signs into the masculine signs, from the reactive into the proactive. And there's going to be big changes. And just because it's moving into the masculine signs doesn't mean that it's all going to get a lot more warlike. It means that it's going to get a lot more assertive and projective rather than confrontational or aggressive.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we're definitely expecting big changes at the end of the year. So, okay, if anyone believes in this, then just make sure that your frequency is high and you're focused on the best future possible. Yeah.
But you see,
contentious and also a little bit sort of old school. This is the beginning of the dawning of the age of Aquarius, and I'm not about to burst into song.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind, Steve.
That's it. Forget it. Blow the internet. No.
It's a good tune. It's a good tune. But you see, this awakening consciousness business is a bit tricky because I don't think that an awakening of consciousness, well, it certainly doesn't look the same for everybody. Let's put it that way. And I think one of the first things that has to happen when your consciousness is awoken is that you have to free yourself from what you've been told that you should do. It's one of the first steps. So this might be controversial, but I hope not. One of the things I've observed in the American election is that there's been quite a few people who have voted against what their peer group have told them to do. Okay. And that's happened on both sides. It's happened on both parties. They've walked away, or they've woken up to something different from what their parents, their community, and their peer group have told them to do. Now, that might mean that they're voting for somebody that we don't like, but actually for them, that is a kind of awakening of consciousness, because they have broken the pattern that they came in with. Now, where that takes them, who can say? But that's just an example of how I think awakening consciousness, well, it's a long process. It looks different for everybody. And it sometimes is a bit painful.
Hey, it needs to be painful sometimes, because otherwise you just get so, if you can't crowbar yourself out of the ruts, you're just going to get into deeper and deeper grooves, and then you really get stuck, and then you become almost hopeless.
Yeah, we definitely need a bit of, well, I guess we need to be pushed into a space where we either go in the direction that we want, or we just allow ourselves to be ruined, I guess, you know. People have to wait until they're pushed until to the edge.
But absolutely, but it's a very old spiritual doctrine, I think, or spiritual idea that you can't really place hope in others. And that's not as grim or cynical as it sounds. You can't place hope in others. You can hope for the best for yourself, and you can maybe hope for, you know, the intervention or assistance or connection with a force higher than you. But as soon as you invest hope in other people, you're running an enormous risk, because they are human and broken just like you are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's not the answer. You know, placing hope in the new person that comes along for election, and then again in 2024 and again in 2028, this isn't the answer at all.
You're just setting yourself up for disappointment.
I think so.
Constantly.
Yes.
And it's not just America, it's every country.
Absolutely.
That works in that. Yes.
Look at the amount of people, in the UK who, you know, we could say that they were foolish for doing it, but the amount of people that voted for Boris Johnson to give him the majority that he got in November, and who now, and you know, it's obvious to see, who now are cursing what they did.
But isn't it also appropriate to say that that wasn't a vote for Boris Johnson? It was a vote against Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And if Keir Starmer had been running the Labour Party then, I think it would have been a hell of a lot closer.
Yes, and maybe it would have gone the other way. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yes.
And some people had no clue what they were actually voting for, and then it was all a bit of a mess.
Absolutely, but the point is, investing the hope in an individual, you're always going to get disappointment, because they are broken like you are.
Yeah.
Exactly. And isn't that also the case when we come to talk about our own individual patterns? Like, for example, in one-to-one relationships, as soon as you start putting people on pedestals, inevitably they're going to topple and fall, and you will become disappointed in them.
Yes.
So
disappointment is a bad emotion. There's lots of bad emotions, but disappointment I think it's a particularly bad one. It can lead people to do all sorts of crazy stuff when they really are crushed by disappointment. You can see that in the world now.
But isn't disappointment just a reaction to false expectation?
Oh yeah, what's the saying? Disappointment is a function of expectations. If you don't have any expectations, you won't get any disappointment.
But I've definitely learned this lesson this year, especially. I think I've seen that, you know, it's not always good to trust other people's opinions, because other people's opinions are also filtered through their own belief systems and their own past traumas and stuff. So in the end, it's best to tune into your own intuition and just see what's the best for you. So I guess the people who are voting, you know, against their own families, and I guess they were going with the intuition, or at least what they thought was the right thing for them. So in a way, that's a good thing, right? That they're thinking for themselves. And I
think that's a necessary step in an awakening of consciousness. It maybe is not the final step. Maybe they go somewhere else afterwards. But I think it is an inevitable, necessary step where you have to free yourself from what you're told to do and think, and decide it's for yourself. And maybe you get it wrong. But you have to take that step if you're gonna awaken in consciousness.
Yeah.
It's on the grounds that it's better to try and fail than not to try at all.
Yeah. Self-governance again.
Because you learn. Everything is a learning process.
Definitely.
And you're never going to be successful all the time.
No.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, we're definitely going to have falls and fails and all kinds. But okay, let's move into the more specific things, because I know people are asking, oh, is my sign going to be affected? Is my number going to be affected? So I know everyone's going to be affected, but are there any specific star signs or numbers that are going to be challenged more than the other ones in the next few years or in the next decade? I know it's a hard question, but I know people want to know. So
I could do a quick answer there. I mean, if it's a generalization, but if you're born on the 11th or the 29th of any month, the 11th or the 29th of any month, or if you know your numerology and you know that your destiny number is 11, then this is your time. This is your time when you're going to be equally under enormous pressure and able to break through and awaken in a huge way.
Wow. Okay. So number 11s. All right. Anyone listening?
From an astrological perspective, you can't look at for the decade or a 5-year period, they say certain individuals are going to be challenged or fortunate. But over the next year, there are certain people who are going to be coming under the microscope more than others. And these are primarily people born from the 28th of January through to about the 5th of February, 28th of April through to about the 5th, 6th of May, 28th of July through to about the 5th, 6th of August, and the 28th of October through to about the 5th, 6th of November. These are the ones next year who are going to be bearing the brunt of the challenges. But what don't kill you makes you stronger.
Okay, so anyone born on these dates, watch out. And in terms of specific planets, I know we're, like you mentioned before, Jupiter will have a big influence. Are there any other planets that we need to be more on the lookout for than the rest?
Not so much planetary activity. It's going to be so much quieter next year compared to 2020. But in the early part of the new year, in the fact, I think it's on the 13th of January, between now and then, there's a new moon in about 9-10 days time, which is, I don't want to get too upbeat, but it's the most positive new moon of 2020. It involves a whole new start. And I've been saying to so many people, let's get through to the middle of November. The new moon on the 13th of December is a total eclipse of the sun. And that's pretty damn important. And then the new moon in January, exactly conjunct Pluto, just before the inauguration in America, it does suggest a whole transformational fresh start. So it's fascinating to me how many people's charts I'm doing. And I'm saying to so many of them, by the time you're into the middle of February, the hardest time of 2021 is over. And if that's carried into the general population, then I can't say that 2021 is going to be a good year, but I can say it should be a lighter year than this one has been.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh boy, yeah. Anything better than this year is a blessing, I think.
Yeah, but this year's has some tremendous gifts in it.
Yeah, no,
it's kind of forced so many of us into redefining our own personal structures and boundaries, shaping up ourselves, making ourselves more self-reliant and self-dependent. And there is a case for saying that not for individual people who have been sick, but for the planet, COVID has not necessarily just been a total disaster, because it's had its positive sides as well.
The unspoken story, the unreported story of 2020, I think, is how many people have faced the COVID situation and said, actually, I don't mind. Actually, I'm all right with this. I'm closing the door. It's my excuse not to see anybody. I don't want to see anybody. Leave me alone. And it's not a function of privilege and luxury. I know a lot of people from all walks of life who have took that attitude and said, I don't mind this, actually. I'm sad if people are ill. I'm sad if people die. But actually, for me, I don't mind it. They have said, and there's a lot of people that have said that.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
I totally agree with you. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think especially for people in the Western world where normally the life is so fast paced and you don't have a chance to sit down and relax and just enjoy yourself. It's been such a breath of fresh air. People actually have the time to sit and read a book and just do nothing for once, so it's been very, it's been varying for a lot of people, but I've seen it myself. A lot of people have found it incredibly refreshing to have that time. So
yeah, they have. They're not loud, you see, so they're not out shouting and screaming about it. So all we hear is the people that can't stand it and are struggling with it. And fair enough, that's real, but it's not everybody.
It's not everyone.
One of the most interesting patterns that's been developing over this year is the struggle in the outside world that between people going out to restaurants and people going out to bars versus children going to school. And because the hospitality industry and the alcohol industry are such big players in terms of financing governments, there's been a real push to keep the bars and the restaurants and the cafes open. And in some cases, it's almost been at the expense of sending children to school. But fortunately, at least in this country, common sense seems to prevail to a certain extent, because whilst the pubs and restaurants are closed at the moment, the kids are still going to school. And I hope that would continue.
Yeah. Yeah, so that at least not all life stops completely, which is good. Yeah. Yeah, and I know, well, personally, I know from my family, my sisters had a hard time looking after the kids and working at the same time from home. So I think people prefer for their kids to be going to school. Yeah.
Yeah. And kids do seem to have a better than average chance of surviving COVID.
Yeah. And also just for people's mental health as well. I mean, it's not healthy for anyone, but let alone kids, to just be stuck at home all day. So that's, I think that's a plus for kids still going to school. But I just wanted to ask a few more questions before we finish. So 2012 and 2020, there seems to be some sort of a link between the two. You know, a lot of people are saying that, or initially what the Mayans considered 2012 to be the end of the world is actually 2020. And so basically 2012 is actually 2020. So is there a link in some sort of numerological, astrological way? Are there any?
I might deviate from the accepted view here. I don't mind. I gave a talk in 2011. I gave a few talks in 2011 actually about 2012. And I remember standing up in Lincoln, I think it was, and saying to a huge group of people, 2012, forget it, nothing's going to happen. It's 2020 you need to be worried about. It's 2016 you need to be worried about. And they almost frog marched me out the room. So, you know, I get the Mayan calendar. I understand the principle of it all. But for me, it was always going to be 2016. And then 2020 was going to be the year when systems were going to break. Now, maybe 2012 initiated something there, maybe some energy shifted, but when it translated into the material world, it was always going to be this year.
And I remember so many people saying to me about 2012 in the early 2000s, and I was looking at the astrology and I'm thinking, yeah, there's 1 or 2 grand crosses, but it's not the be all and end all. And here I have to agree with Richard, because so many people have been flagging up videos I did in both 2015 and 2017, where I was talking about November 2020. So it perhaps would be appropriate to say that, yeah, when they were talking about 2012, 2020 is actually far more significant, because 2020, let's face it, has been a game changer. We're never going to go back to the way it was a year ago. Not completely, not ever. No matter how much old structures or establishments try and enforce that, it just can't happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. It has been a game changer. It will not go. By the time that 2020 is ended, a number of things will be ended, and they will not go back to how they were. I mean, it's clear to see. We don't have to be any kind of skills to know that. It's obvious to see just looking around the world.
So that's a question for both of you. To what extent do you think the people now have the power to steer things in the direction that they really want? Or are we still kind of under huge control? To what extent can we choose where this goes?
Only in your own mind and in your own life. I think that's as far as you can do it, but that's enough.
I'm just going to echo what Richard just said, exactly in a different way. The more people are developing their own consciousness, or studying the esoteric and the quasi-spiritual, the less they feel trapped by the old standards and the old boundaries, and the more they embrace new futures.
Because here's a radical thought, right? Here's a radical thought, which is, maybe it's a bit crazy and maybe it's not quite right, but here's a radical thought. Maybe the President of the United States of America isn't that powerful. Whoever it is, maybe they're not actually that powerful. Maybe it's a bit of a Wizard of Oz kind of thing. and maybe it is a bit of that. And maybe actually the power, you know, we're conditioned to think the power is all out there. Maybe the actual power is in here. And the awakening of consciousness, the pressure we've been under, is for us to realize that individually at first, and then you band together with others that have all ways already realized it. But maybe the emperor has got no clothes. Maybe Emperor Trump has got no clothes, but maybe also Emperor Biden has got no clothes either.
Right. In recent years, just in the last 7 or 8 years, and I can't be objective about this because it may be my observing this that affects it, but I am seeing more and more people becoming not so much psychic or intuitive, but definitely precognitive, where they're picking up things which someone's just about to say, or they know when something's just about to happen, or they're just really in tune with what's going on around them. It's to do with time. And this seems to be becoming more prevalent.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I've definitely seen that in the spiritual community. People are saying they're getting a lot more intuitive, a lot more psychic. Like you said, it seems like people are just able to tap in a lot more with that kind of global consciousness and kind of feel into what's happening. So it definitely feels like things are starting to connect a lot more.
that in itself is going to terrify the presidents and the archbishops and the captains of industry, who are not that nasty that they want to keep us all down and on tethers in the fields, but neither are they interested in us elevating our consciousness.
That's a great point, because there's much to criticize Donald Trump about. There's a great deal to criticize Donald Trump about, but I simply don't buy the idea that Joe Biden has any interest in an acceleration of consciousness whatsoever. He has no interest in that. He doesn't even know what it means. So I just don't buy this idea that Trump bad, therefore we must run into the arms of this guy. That's not the answer.
Totally concur. This thing around frenemies, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That is just a self-repeating loop that leads perpetually downhill. Not good.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, a lot of people have actually called Trump to be the person who has greatly accelerated people's consciousness, because he's literally pushed, in a way, he's pushed us to see what's real, what's truth, he's very upfront about a lot of
I agree entirely. And maybe he's not conscious of this. Maybe he's not conscious of this. But I've long thought that Trump is essentially an instrument of what. But he is a catalyst. He's like a glitch in the matrix. He definitely is. And maybe he isn't conscious of it. But that's why it was necessary for him to be there, because it will never go back to pre-Trump times. He has changed everything.
I find myself agreeing totally with both of you in that Donald Trump has been a force for good in the strangest of ways, and without him being aware of it in any way. And I do believe he's totally focused on himself. He's a total narcissist, but because of his attitudes, he's forced other individuals into standing up for themselves, developing themselves, and becoming more self-reliant. And for the planet, that's just brilliant.
And he's not done yet.
He's not. No, he's not. We will. However, mark my words. From an astrological perspective, I expect him within a year to be seriously playing the health card.
Wow.
Watch this space.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either of that.
Wow. Wow, interesting stuff. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. It's been an honor to have you both. And again, this was just incredible information, incredible knowledge. So for anyone who wants to learn more about your work, Steve, they can find you at stevejudd.co. And you can find Richard at thehermitage.org.uk. And of course, Steve has his own YouTube channel where you can find him at Steve Judd Astrology. Is it Steve Judd Astrology? Yeah. So yeah, do you guys have any final words of wisdom that you want to just impart on everyone watching right now?
Go on, Steve, you go first.
Well, at the end of the day, I always like to think my glass is 50.1% full. And my catchphrase is negativity can't exist where there's humour, even if it's somewhat not necessarily the most dignified or authentic type of humour. But we are one of the very few species on this planet, both now and in the past, that has the ability to laugh at ourselves. No other species has that capacity for self-derogatory humour. So don't forget to laugh, people, because laughter's good for the body and it's good for the soul. And without laughter, we're screwed.
Yeah, I wouldn't have said that, but that I agree entirely. Yeah, there has to be an optimism, but I think it's all about everybody's unique. Everybody can do something special in a special way. The old systems didn't facilitate this. Maybe the new systems will. So amid all of the crazy, and there'll be more crazy, it's an opportunity to find out who you are and to find out what you're for. And there's no more important thing than that. Possibly apart from having a laugh as well.
Yeah. So always remember humor. Amazing way to end this. Thank you so much again. And for everyone watching today, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, maybe we'll catch up again in 2021 to see what's changed.
Thank you, Desi. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.